Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Fulham. We are back after a 1-0 victory against Leeds. Not the best of games, let's be perfectly honest. A very tough watch at 10 p.m. Australian time. Drifting away on the sofa until the 90th minute, plus 3 I believe it was, when one of the most comical own goals I've ever seen ended up in the back of the Leeds net to give us a 1-0 victory. Here to talk it all through, especially focusing, I think, today on one of the best cameos I've seen in a Fulham shirt in a very long time. We have Elton. How are we, Dad?
Well, thanks. I thought you were going to big me up in terms of something I did there with the little intro you gave me, but I'll accept that. I'll accept the almost intro.
Like it would have been a perfect time to get someone on for a cameo and really just be able to flog them as good as Kevin. But I don't think anyone's ever going to get even remotely close to that. What a cameo that was. What an introduction to life as a Fulham player. I think we both just watched the highlights beforehand, and crazy to think. I sent it to a few people actually this morning just saying, look at this bloke. We've just picked up the new Neymar. And you kind of forget, because it was so exciting and because the game had been so drab, but it's hard to comprehend how much of an impact Kevin actually had in 10 minutes. And I noted down a couple of highlights to talk about today as well, and realised that he'd done 3 or 4 quite incredible things within 5 minutes of each other, having just come on for his debut, having not spent any time with the squad really. I mean, a couple of weeks, but it was just exciting, and I'm excited to talk about it all. But I guess let's jump straight into it, shall we? Let's talk about the game itself, and let's start, Dad, with the lineup. Now, after an international break, we always know that Fulham do struggle. Our results are poor. I think we've only had 2 wins of the last 9 international breaks, maybe. Were you expecting huge changes? And if so, did we see those changes that you were expecting?
Well, change is not a word synonymous with Marco Silva's management style. So, no. But why is it? Why is it that we perform so poorly after an international break? It's not like we have, an entire squad that goes on international duty and they're all jet lagged and they're all cooked from playing 90 minutes just 48 hours before, and they can't get their heads around. Why? Why are we so poor at bouncing back when every team in the Premier League has the same challenge? Why can't we do it?
I mean, it's an unanswerable question. Our other sides managed to bounce back after international breaks perfectly. I think we are. It feels like Fulham are slow starters. You look at the start of every season, we often get off to a slow start. I feel like when there's that break, we just completely lose momentum, and it's. I mean, a few people made some good points, like should Iwobi have been playing, having gone on international duty, having flown to. I think both of their games were played in Africa, and playing a full playing a full 90 minutes in both games. Should he have been starting? And I think he looked lackadaisical and looked just off. So I think there's probably some questions to be asked about how Silva utilises his squad when it comes to international breaks. And you look at players like Smith Rowe, who was there throughout the whole international break. Kevin was with the squad for the whole international break as well. Like I feel like there should have been some considerations taken into account. And I think because, like you said, Marco doesn't like to change things up that much, it's actually a little bit detrimental because you can't go into it with the same 11 when you've got Lukic, Berger, although Berger admittedly didn't have the toughest international break, Anderson, Bassi, Iwobi, a number of players starting and playing a lot of minutes throughout the international break. Maybe we just needed to rotate a bit and allow some of those guys who had a bit of a rest to actually be in there and bring some of that energy. I don't know if you agree with that, if you think any differently.
I think it's quite a talking point, actually, and I think it's one of those things where for the longest time we've been, cheering Marco on and complaining that he hasn't always had the squad that we think he needs. and he's expressed his own frustration at that. Um, Frustrating window, but we have signed a couple of very, very good wingers and potentially a good striker as well. That, don't know how much he's going to feature, but let's talk about the wingers. Suddenly, we're a little bit flush for choice, um, with some of these players, and the central midfield, um, uh, a lack of depth aside. Well, it's going to be really interesting to see how he actually approaches this, because Marco doesn't like to change things. He takes an awful long time to introduce players, and I do get that. He wants his system embedded. He wants it imprinted on people's minds. But I think, you know Kevin yesterday showed that if you drop quality in, um, it just shines. Particularly if other players are up for it. I mean, if someone is not going to give and go with him, then he's going to look stupid. But if you've got a very, very talented player, does he really need to be in 1, 2, or 4 weeks of training before he starts getting minutes off the bench? I wouldn't have thought so. And if he takes a long time to introduce Chukwueze, and he bursts onto the scene, um, when other people are struggling before him, that's going to be really frustrating. But I can see it happening.
Yeah, I think with Kevin in particular, he was always going to have an impact off the bench, and I think that's a bit of a given. I do understand in a way why he maybe wasn't introduced straight away. I think benefit of hindsight now, you'd look at it and go, we really needed someone like Kevin throughout the game. But you have to remember, we saw Kevin in one-dimensional, sounds maybe a little bit harsh, but we saw Kevin come on for the last 10 minutes when all he had to do was attack. It was basically get the ball to Kevin, you take on players and try things. You can't really do that for a full 90 minutes. And there is a lot of intricate wing play that does need to happen. You see it with Iwobi getting the ball out wide, and there's a lot of link up with Sessegnon. There's a lot of link up with what was Smith Rowe towards the end, but Josh King throughout the game as well, and the deeper players. So I do understand that maybe he's not fully adapted to the system yet, and so having him play a full 90 minutes maybe could have been seen as a risk, but at the same time, it does feel like a risk that we could have taken.
If he's that good,
yeah, but you can't allow an individual to just stand out wide and do whatever they want for 90 minutes, even if you are that good. Yes, I mean, it was very clear as well once we realised, I think that first time Kevin picked up the ball and he did 4 or 5 step overs and then clipped a ball into the box. We know
outlandishly.
Yeah, well, there were a couple of outlandish times, but this was the first one where Lukic tried to then spinning kick it into the back of the net. I know we're jumping ahead a little bit here, but
no, we're going to keep doing this every time we try and talk about other things.
But it was noticeable once we tried to play the ball. Once we first saw, when you give the ball to Kevin, stuff happens. It was noticeable after that. We were just trying to find him at all times, and when. And again, we will talk about it. We will talk about it later, but the chance that led to the corner that led to the goal, where we're sort of passing the ball around the back line, and you can just see Kevin's waiting out wide, and we're just waiting for the defender to just drop off him and get that little bit of space so that we can play the ball into him. And once we do get it to him, he plays it into Sess, who plays a lovely 1-2. And again, those two players were together in training sessions for the last couple of weeks. Sess lays it off to him beautifully, and he takes a first-time shot that would have been probably one of the best debut goals you're likely to see. Look, it's exciting. Let's take a step back, because we could literally spend the next hour talking about Kevin if we really wanted to, and I'd be very easily falling into that trap. But let's take a big step back and look at the first half, and let's be honest, this was... it was a real struggle for me to not just sit on my phone for the whole first half, because it was dire. Dad, we weren't watching this one together, but it felt like it was a poor first half, where this just looked like a classic post-international break Fulham.
Well, I was really trying to understand what was, fundamentally what was so bad about it. Why was it such a poor game? And I think we weren't very good. Leeds weren't very good. Um, I don't think Leeds were absolutely terrible, but geez, we gave them a lot of respect, and we gave them a lot of respect in our starting lineup as well, which is probably another thing worth. Well, it's not really worth talking about because I think we know why we started with that 11.
To,
Um,
to jump in though, and I'll throw to a question that got posed by Russ Goldman actually of Cottage Talk in our Discord, and he posed the question: why is Silva playing not to lose against Leeds? And I think you sort of just started to touch on it there. It and Black, White, and Fred as well in our Discord. Similar question: should we be playing both Berger and Lukic in midfield against bottom half opposition? Is it time to see both Smith Rowe and King to help break down those low blocks? And I think that's kind of what you're talking about there, where it's a defensive lineup against the lead side.
well, it's not very brave, and it gives them too much respect because maybe that would have been a golden opportunity to see if the ESR and King thing could work at 8 and 10. I, you know, I just don't think King would embarrass himself, even if it wasn't quite working. He wouldn't embarrass himself in the eight, and he'd still do a job for you. And arguably, might get bundled around by a more physical midfield, but he would still do a job. He's proven himself at this level. It's not, he's no longer, um, an imponderable. But I can't remember what your original question was now. Uh, but you know, I still think that um, Raul Mooney's for Raul was obvious because I think Raul returned to London quite late, and
Mm.
he did play in both the games. I think that he Mexico
Yeah,
featured in, um, and it didn't surprise me that Harry Wilson started. Iwobi, look, in hindsight, it's very easy to say, "Oh, he was very tired. He shouldn't have played," because he had a pretty poor game by his standards. He just was ineffective, and he looked leggy. He just looked very, very tired and couldn't get into the game. He didn't make any terrible errors. He just wasn't his usual impact. Um, Having said all of that, I actually thought we defended quite well. Not that they really came hard at us, but I think we looked organised. I was kind of surprised to see Cuenca didn't even make the bench.
mm.
And again, surprised that Robinson played no part. But maybe, yeah, maybe he just wasn't needed. And as someone who's being nursed back to full fitness, not required.
Yeah, it's interesting. A few people sort of raised that and said, "Is it time to maybe start worrying about um, Robinson? The fact that he's not making appearances at the moment." I think, to be fair, Cess, who is not a left back, has actually been doing very well at left back
Sure.
and filling in really well defensively. He's been good. Admittedly, wasn't overly challenged by this lead side. Aronson was kept fairly under wraps on the right hand side
I thought he was good
for
though.
the
I
majority
thought
of the game.
Cess was
Yeah, he
pretty good.
was.
He was pretty good.
I mean, Bogle, who was the right back for Leeds, did manage to get forward and cause us a few issues, but I'd actually say that he caused Iwobi more issues than Cess, and Cess is doing a good job. But there is something to be said there for the fact that Robinson still isn't getting to this side. We know he had surgery in the off season, but it feels like we're now kind of midway through September. We're 5 games into the season in total. We've gone through an international break where he's had a full rest. You'd feel like he'd be ready to come in, and it is a little strange now that he's not playing. So that injury is obviously still hanging around, and it felt like he was there potentially to come on. I was actually surprised that he didn't come on because I thought, personally, I thought Iwobi didn't have a very good game, and you could have easily taken off. Iwobi and brought on Robinson, and then had Sess push forward. And I think Sess actually had a very good game in general.
He's probably
Talking of
having given the timing of his surgery, there's every chance he's just not fit. You know, even
possibly,
if his injury is healing quite well and the rehab's going well, he's missed out on an entire preseason. And
yeah, possibly.
so who knows? Who knows?
And in terms of the first half, I mean, really, you can recap it fairly quickly. There were a couple of chances. The first one was Calvert-Lewin free header after the ball gets hooked back in after a corner. He
Poor
is
effort.
offside. It definitely would have been flagged offside because I reckon he was half a body offside, which might not seem like much, but it was clear. Heads it straight at Leno. I mean, we were linked with Calvert-Lewin a lot last season and in the off-season. Based on what I saw yesterday, I'm kind of glad we didn't pick him up because I don't think he would have added anything to our squad.
I agree.
And then the other opportunity, which was a very close one, it did hit the crossbar in the end. That was Longstaff's shot. The ball sort of pings around on the edge of the box. It was actually a good little move by Leeds, and it falls to Longstaff, who stings a shot at Leno. It sort of goes just over Leno. It did look like Leno was actually trying to duck to get out of the way almost. It just clips the crossbar. But really, apart from that, there was very little. And it's a question, again, that's been posed in our Discord, a couple of questions. And I'll throw it out here to you from SCS in our Discord. How do we create more from central areas? I noticed a number of times yesterday Leeds were happy to just vacate the middle of the pitch to have numbers out wide for our predictable attacks. Do you think this is why Silva was really complaining about midfield options? And again, you sort of touched on it as well about the team selection. And I think Berger and Lukic in midfield just really struggled to create anything through the middle of the park. And we seem to focus down the middle as well, which didn't make much sense when we have good wingers. I also thought, I know Anderson was given man of the match, but I thought he often had the ball, progressed it really nicely, got into a good position in the middle, but just played dumb passes through the middle of the park. Why do you think
the idea was good, but it wasn't very well executed. He gave the ball
the
away.
idea was good, but some of those passes were, champagne passes. We're talking about trying to split. There was one where he passed it. It looked like he was trying to split maybe 4 different Leeds players and literally threading a needle. And I mean, if it had come off, brilliant pass. But realistically, you're a centre back, a good ball playing centre back, to be fair. But you're never going to string that pass through. I mean, that's Man City style passing that we're aiming for, and we shouldn't be having to do that to just create an opportunity.
Do you know what? 2 things. I don't mind him trying, because if he hits some form in those, 20, 30, 40-yard passes and they start coming off, it's devastating and it's a real weapon. I don't mind him trying. None of those created problems for us, which almost ended in a disaster. So I don't think... I take your point that the execution wasn't very good, but none of them were so high risk that the turnovers actually caused us major problems.
I think against a better team, they could have been problems.
Sure,
because we did give the ball away a few times, and it was sort of a...
But it was Leeds, and they couldn't capitalize.
3-on-3 or a 4-on-4 kind of opportunity. Yeah, I agree. Maybe, yeah.
To your point about our midfield and why they're not creating more, honestly, without any disrespect to Berger and Lukic, I don't actually expect much more from them in creative play and kind of really doing something damaging or dangerous in the last third. I don't know. You have to believe that they're under instruction, unless told to do otherwise, to sort of play that way. Because prior to Berger coming to Fulham, I thought he actually liked getting up the pitch and actually getting involved in shooting. He scored one against us. But I almost feel like that stands out in our mind as characterizing his play, but perhaps it doesn't. because he regularly gets to the edge of the box, and it just predictably looks to lay it off. Lukic, to me, he's got better and better in his defensive role, but I don't see him as a player who's comfortable carrying the ball forward into dangerous areas and getting in the box and being part of an attacking build up. He just isn't that player. And I don't know that it's reasonable to be disappointed that we're not getting that from either of those two players. I just don't see that as what they bring.
Mm.
And if we've talked about it, like it's something that we all believe could come off. If King could make a fist of it, like AP could not in the 8th position, he's clearly very attack minded. He's also very creative, and he likes carrying the ball forward. That could be incredibly exciting. But to hope and wish for Lukic and Berger to be that week in, week out, I just don't see it.
I would definitely like to see Berger carry the ball more often. Like you said, when he played against us previously, and I still think back to the goal he scored against us, I think when he was playing for Burnley.
It was Burnley.
And just that ability to run with the ball at defenders, I'd like to see that more often from him. I think it seems like he sits deep trying to break down a defence or trying to, almost wait for that opportunity to present itself to play a killer ball. And teams are this Leeds team as well. To be fair to them, they were very well organised. You could see very clearly the lines that they were putting in place and their defensive structure, and they did just shut us down completely and gave us no options. But I guess the worrying thing in a way is we just when that happens, and it's happened so many times over the last couple of seasons where teams play that low block against us, we just don't have a plan B sometimes.
Is this your segue to loop back to Kevin?
Well, it'll get there eventually, don't you worry. It's always going to get back to Kevin. But add to that the fact that I thought Wilson was off yesterday. I thought Iwobi was off yesterday. I thought Josh King was promising, but it wasn't his best game. He got crowded out a lot, and Leeds did that incredibly well where they'd constantly have 2 or 3 people challenging for the ball, and we weren't quick enough to get the ball out of that situation and be able to break. Because when you're playing well and your players are in form, you have a couple of Leeds players, and often it was 3 Leeds players, try and create the challenge and win the ball back. And if you can quickly slide the ball away, you can counterattack very quickly. And I think we were a bit slow on the ball often yesterday. Bassi, I thought, was slow on the ball. Berger and Lukic were constantly slow. Iwobi and Wilson just didn't have that little edge and again, maybe it's because they both played in the international break and didn't have that break that the other players had.
I thought Berger actually improved.
100%. I didn't even notice Berger in the first half, honestly. I can't imagine he had more than 1 or 2 touches. Second half, especially defensively, I thought he did really well. He made a couple of very good tackles, and then he just started to hold the ball a little bit better and pass the ball around a bit better in the second half. But I think nothing really happened until the first set of changes. We saw Traore and Smith Rowe come on for King and Wilson. Now, I get that Josh King's 18. He wasn't having the best game, but would you have taken Josh King off in that situation? I definitely agree with Wilson going off. I think he looked tired and fairly ineffective. Admittedly, he did put in a very good effort just before he got subbed with the free kick, which I think on a slippery day like it was in that second half could have easily ended up in the back of the net. And that was probably our, at that point in the game was our best chance easily, because I think it was our first real chance until then. But would you have taken off Josh King?
No, I actually wouldn't have. And that's not because, I'm now suddenly so wedded to just giving him every opportunity because he's done well. But I don't think he was having a mare. He was not having a terrible game. It just wasn't quite coming off for him. He wasn't lackluster. He was involved and trying quite hard. It just wasn't working. And I think as the game actually opened up, he might have been more effective. So I would have bet that as the game progressed, he could have been more dangerous as it opened up a bit more.
and a point to that, I think you look at how much time Berger and Lukic had when they were sitting deep. Josh King constantly getting closed down because he was obviously quite far advanced up the pitch. He was often on the edge of the box trying to receive the ball. I think if we'd allowed King that space, his passing is very good and his movement's very good. His ability to sort of skip away from challenges and actually make something happen. I thought that would have been a really good opportunity actually to swap out Berger for King, maybe have King drop into the 8 and have Lukic sit in the 6, and then
That would have
bring
been a good
ESR.
experiment. Would have been a good
Exactly.
experiment.
I think that was the time, I think,
The
to
opportunity
try
missed there, I
that,
think. Yeah.
to see ESR and King working together, because I think they actually seem to have quite a good understanding with each other. I would have quite liked to see that. And then, as Black, White, and Fred here says, Iwobi should have been subbed for ESR. And then when you wanted to bring Kevin off, then Josh could have come off and ESR could have moved into the middle. I think that makes a lot of sense, actually, because I think really, and we were sort of messaging during the game, I could have quite happily at half time taken off Iwobi and Wilson.
I thought you were going to say, I could have quite happily gone to bed.
That was very tempting last night, I have to tell you. I nothing against Iwobi and Wilson, but they looked tired. And there was one point, I think it must have been in the first half, but Iwobi let Bogle just run past him at one point, and didn't try and track back and make a tackle. And again, nothing against Iwobi. I don't think it wasn't like a stinker, but he just wasn't doing the things that we usually see from him. He wasn't the kind of player we usually see. He wasn't those jinking little movements that create chances. And maybe, again, not having Robinson running around the outside of him, giving him that extra space that he often gets, maybe that's affecting him, and maybe he just doesn't work as well with Sess as he does with Robinson.
I just think it doesn't need a Queen's Council or King's Council inquiry. For as far as I'm concerned, Iwobi's got enough goodwill and credit in the bank to have the odd flat poor game. It's going to happen,
100%.
And off the back, he's got nothing to prove, and off the back of a pretty busy and difficult international break, we should have known better, and we did have options against a modest opposition, and I think that was strategically a poor call. And you know, it's so finely balanced. You have one player in a midfield or wing position who's having a flat game. It actually changes everything because you don't have an outlet. You have nothing in the middle of the park, down one side at least. And it actually just disconnects everybody. And so it's not, I'm not blaming Iwobi, but to select him seems to have been a poor decision for a bunch of reasons.
Yeah, and again, I think we do need to be a little careful not to completely use hindsight here as well, because it's clear and obvious that Kevin starting would have made this a very different game from the outset. I don't think anyone could have really known that. I know he obviously has performed well in training based on a few little comments we've seen that he's looked impressive, but it would have been a bit of a risk to start him, maybe a risk worth taking looking back on it. But I'm trying not to talk about Kevin too much, but
no, let's talk about
easily
Kevin.
The most exciting thing. Before we do, there was one more opportunity beforehand. We've talked about Wilson's free kick just before he got subbed, but ball gets launched forward by Anderson. It is fractionally aimless in the sort of direction of Muniz, who I think Muniz had a good game in what was a tough game where he didn't get much service, but he did win that free kick for Wilson very well by just getting his body around it. He puts in a tackle which maybe could have been given as a foul against him on Bogle, I think it was, and that's the one that Smith Rowe then picks up. Does quite well to sort of beat the defender and get a little bit of a weak shot off on goal, and the keeper kind of makes a bit of a hash of it, makes a leg save, which then ricochets onto the post. It's another opportunity for Fulham that maybe Smith Rowe would have hoped he'd struck a little better. Go on.
I just wonder whether he made the right decision there. Look, it was actually, I thought he struck it pretty well on his left foot. He hit it quite sweetly, but he'd actually taken himself out wider than he probably would
Yeah,
have preferred. Um, I can't remember the exact scenario, but there might have been a bit too much traffic inside, so he had no choice but to go left.
I actually think he
Which
was expecting the ball to be. He was everyone sort of stopped because I think everyone was
mm,
expecting a foul on the from the Muniz challenge,
mm,
and it'd be
mm,
interesting to see what VAR would have said that maybe the referee had made a clear and obvious error there for a foul.
oh, of
Um,
course.
I reckon it almost certainly would have been called back if we'd put the ball in the back of the net. But yeah, I think you're right. He just got caught in two minds a bit because of that. And I would have liked to see him just, lash it across the keeper maybe and force the keeper to do a little
Uh,
more than putting it.
I think where he ended up, and he got his shot away relatively quickly, but where he ended up,
Yeah.
he made it very difficult for himself. The ankle was tight, and for him
Mm.
to get across the keeper, there would have been, I don't know how he would have done that.
Or
Probably would have
maybe
had
to
to
work
go.
it with Muniz or something. I don't know. It
Yeah,
just
yeah,
feels like he maybe could have tested the keeper a little more, who kind of didn't even know about the save that he made because it sort of got hit at him.
yeah,
But
yeah.
now we can finally talk about Kevin as if we haven't already talked about him for 20 minutes. But
So
Kevin,
let me just say on this very topic, in a way, it's kind of poetic that it was such a drab game up to this point. Crowd were quiet, in
mm,
as much as we could sense on TV. It seemed very flat. I think the crowd were a bit frustrated that it was such a blur kind of a game, and in a way, it actually created a beautiful canvas for him to come and light it up. You know,
and just what excitement from the off. I mean, he came on in about the 75th minute. It felt like we just couldn't even get the ball to him for the first 5 minutes that he was on. I think he maybe had one touch, but when he finally got the ball at feet, we saw what he can do, and we saw what we were missing throughout the whole game. Iwobi and Wilson, every time they got the ball, there was indecision, I'd say, or indecisiveness, where they just weren't really sure what to do. And it's that sort of Samba mentality, that youthful exuberance of a player who's just decides, I got the ball at feet, head down, run at the defender, take him on, see what can happen. Love seeing the step overs. I know Iwobi occasionally chucks one in, but when you see Kevin step over the ball about 5 or 6 times before dinking the ball into the box, it's exciting to see. And I get that was the first one. He does multiple step overs, little clip into Cess, who actually does very well with a little flicked header backwards. And Lukic maybe could have done a little better there. He's trying to go for a bit of a spectacular first time. He actually was in that much space. He had time to take a touch and then probably
yeah.
finish after that. But just a really, like you said, it did seem to just lift the mood in the stadium. I don't know what it was like in the stadium, obviously, but it felt like once that happened, you kind of go, okay,
I think
this is going to be exciting.
people instantly spotted. Hang on a second, this is something special. Instantly,
Mm,
you can just see it, and to me, maybe speaking too soon and too early, but he didn't. Even when Ronaldo does his step overs, you kind of know he's going to do 10 of them. And sure, it's mesmerizing, but you know what he's going to do. He just keeps doing them until he gets past you. But I thought Kevin was quite clever. He'd do a couple of step overs and then jink and then actually turn the other way and then go back. So he was actually breaking it up and actually using a lot of tricks and skill to actually gain himself a half a yard. And you said we've been missing this for the game. I think we've been missing this at Craven Cottage for some time.
oh,
Name a player,
100%.
name a player in the last 3 years who's done that. We saw a little bit of occasionally, particularly when he first came from Solomon. He was exciting. We know
Mm,
Willian can do it, but he doesn't have the legs anymore. He certainly has the skill, but it's not only the skill, is it? It's actually the confidence that a 22-year-old kind of Brazilian kid who is scared of nobody. And I love the little look on his face when he came on. He looked so excited to show his talents, just waiting for the ball, because he probably looking at the game and sussing it out and thinking, I don't rate these guys, and I
mm.
think I'm going to have some fun here. Um, so so exciting, so exciting. That ball to Adama was, as I said before, outlandish. How he
The
actually
Yeah,
the one
I
that
was going to say
Adama
the
cooked.
commentators were kind of dumbfounded and shocked afterwards because they said, how has he managed to dig the ball out in that
Yeah,
way, sort of with the outside of his foot, with almost no backswing whatsoever,
no backswing. He
and
literally hooped
lofts it
it
to the other. He's
with
got a lot of
pace.
power in his foot.
Yeah,
It's quite impressive because he's literally just stabbed that, but he's put it high at the back post, and that's the
yeah.
excitement that you get from a player like that. Their ability to just be able to dink the ball out of nowhere, and we saw it with. Like I said, there's this little period, I think it's the 81st to the 85th minute, 4 minutes, where you get those step overs and the little flick the little cross to Cess. Then a couple of minutes later, he's found space again, or created space again. He's got two defenders around him, manages to stab the ball to the back post, and Adama just floats in the air as well. It's a shame. It's just a fraction too high for him, and it's a shame it's Adama and not maybe
Yeah,
Jimenez or
well,
Muniz there.
exactly. Imagine Jimenez on the back of that. He would
Yeah,
have,
well,
he would have
especially
buried
after
that.
his goal in the international break as well, which is very similar. That ball sort of lofted in the air, and he manages to
Or
put the header
dare I say
into
his name? Can you imagine Mitrovic on the end of that?
Oh, absolutely. And then a few minutes after that, again, he does very well to get down the left flank, finds a bit of space and puts a really good ball into the near post. It's a shame no one was attacking that. And I think as he spends more time with the squad and they start to understand the style of play and the style of chances that he's likely to create, we're going to see a lot coming from Kevin. And it's sort of one of those ones where it makes me understand why Silva maybe didn't put him in, because that's a good ball he's put in there, but there's just no one attacking that near post. It's a fraction too close to the keeper, but you can just see like ESR was sort of hanging back a little bit, waiting for the pullback, which is what we'd normally see from Iwobi and Wilson, is that ball being squared back along the turf towards sort of the penalty spot for a finish. But Kevin's putting the ball into a very dangerous area, but unfortunately just no one there to attack it.
But the memo's gone out. Everyone's seen it, and I reckon it's not even so much that he needs to fit in with us. I think we need to know that it's always on with him. And I thought Cess was very good in reading exactly what he was going to do there with that little 1-2. He actually, I mean, Cess did well, but he actually gave Kevin a bit to do to control that ball before he put that shot in as well.
Yeah,
he still had a bit to do.
That was the fourth opportunity. That's obviously in stoppage time, and that leads to the corner, which leads to the goal. I think it's again. I think I said it before. It's good to see, or it shows when those two players have spent the last couple of weeks in training together. We saw some of the Motspur Park footage of the guys training and doing some of those little sessions, and you can see that Cess and Kevin have obviously spent a bit of time together, and Cess knew that he could lay that ball off, and it's really well found by Kevin. A little, again, outside of the foot, little dink in through the gap to Cess, who lays it into space, and Kevin does very well, gets away from the defender, and geez, he lashed that shot, and it's a top-class save from the Leeds keeper. As I said to you earlier, I think probably 7 times out of 10, that's actually a goal.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost top corner, and it's not quite top corner, but geez, it was going in. And what a way that would have been to introduce yourself to the Fulham fans. Unfortunately, it doesn't go in, but it creates the opportunity and the corner, which was taken by Lukic, who gets his first assist of the season. And I mean, we've talked about Kevin, but let's take a couple of minutes at least to talk about this own goal. I was kind of shocked. Firstly, I thought Tom Cairney had scored, which I think the commentator said Cairney.
So did Gentleman Jim.
I think everyone thought it was Tom Cairney, mainly because he ran away and celebrated like it was Tom Cairney. But it's a good ball from Lukic. He kind of almost finds Cairney's head, who found himself in a bit of space. But what happens there? How has the defender put the ball in from almost a penalty spot into the side netting? And it's a weird one.
I think what's happened is that Cairney's jumped, and he's actually misread the miss. He obviously thought Cairney was going to head that, because I don't think he anticipates the ball coming. He didn't head it. The ball hit his head. He didn't actually.
Well, it's sort of like the ball. If he hadn't done anything, the ball would have hit him on the chest. And it's sort of one of those ones where you see the ball coming and you duck your head to
Yeah,
go,
yeah,
oh
yeah.
shit, I need to head that because if it hits my chest, I've got no
Which
control over it.
which
At
creates even
least you
more
think,
pace.
yeah, at least you think, oh, if I get it with my head, at least it will go a distance. It's not just going to land randomly near my
Yeah.
feet. But
You'd
it's
be pretty
like
pretty
I don't
proud of
think you
putting
could have
that away, wouldn't you?
placed. You couldn't have. I don't think any striker
Jesus.
would have put that away in that fashion. To just sort of
Yeah.
duck your head and the ball perfectly curl away from the keeper into the side netting. It's a great finish, and we'll take it. But geez, I mean, have we got away with one there? I titled the
Well,
podcast "Blushes Saved Again." Do you feel
absolutely.
like we've got away with one?
Look, I wouldn't characterize it like that, but I would more say, look, you take it. Um, you've still got to manage the game. You know, a Fulham side in a different time period could have fluffed it from there even by not actually shutting the game down. So having gone a goal up by, you have to call it pure luck because it wasn't completely uncontested. You know, it was a there's stuff going on in the box. If you create the pressure and you're going up for a header, defenders have to switch on, and if they get it a bit wrong at close quarters, things can go wrong. So, in a way, um, it's poor defending because he should have actually got his body in that position where the ball could end up in the back of the net. I mean, in any way you look at it, you know, heading the ball with your body position like it was is unforgivable, right? The ball,
Mm,
even if the ball is just going to hit your head. So you have to take something. You have to give Fulham something for creating the scenario whereby they make a mistake and we force an error. Okay. Um, but look, I don't even want to get into whether or not we were deserving because that's just football. You get an opportunity, you grab the 3 points, you shut the game down, you close it out, and you off you go. And we've had a tough 3 week start to the campaign, which we always knew we were going to have. And yeah, you could argue that we've had a bit of bad luck. I don't think that was in any way our luck being returned. Certainly not by the officials, but yeah, you just take it, and you know it's just nice to not be on the end of terrible luck.
mm. Yeah, and look, I agree. I think we have been unlucky so far this season, and maybe it is that sort of break we've been waiting for. A great comment from Colin Bolger on our YouTube live here, just saying, I love the fact that people are calling it for it to be contender for
Mhm.
September's goal of the month. That would be quite funny if August was a disallowed VAR goal and September was an own goal for our first two goals of the month. Could set a bit of a trend there for the rest of the season, which would be quite hilarious. But yeah, I agree. I think you create those kind of opportunities by putting balls into good areas, by challenging for
Sure.
balls. You know, we see often. I mean, own goals happen all the time. It's often just maybe a little closer to the line, and the ball comes off a shoulder or a thigh or a hip or something, and it's a little less magical than that, if you will. Where this was, it was very weird and different, but like you say, you have to create those opportunities in the first place, and I think we did well to do that, and we definitely looked a better side in the second half, I thought. But I do feel like we got away with one there, and we need to be a lot better when we take on Brentford
But
next week.
but again, that whole period, once Kevin came on and started running at them, and the crowd got up, everyone started suddenly wanting to be part of it. And we had a number of opportunities in and around the stuff that Kevin was doing. Like you said, it led to the corner. Good corner from Lukic. It all kind of, it is a momentum, and he changed the momentum, and we somehow capitalized on it. Not in a way you could ever have predicted, but I'll take that. I'm going to say we should, yeah, we should probably accept that we probably contributed to it.
Yeah, look, I mean, at the end of the day, a win's a win. It doesn't matter how you get the
Yeah,
points. At the end of the season,
absolutely.
all the points get counted up. It doesn't matter if they're own goals. Geez, we'd take. Well, some teams might not take own goals to get you into a European spot, but I
I
think
would.
yeah, I would happily take 1-0 wins with own goals for the whole season if it meant we stayed up and got into a European spot. A comment here, a question, I guess, from Colm. Thoughts on the referee's performance? Thought he missed a couple of handballs.
Yeah,
I think the refereeing's been terrible all season so far, and we saw Robinson obviously getting in a bit of trouble in the international break for making comments about the standard of refereeing being poor for a very long time, and I kind of have to agree. There were a couple of handballs. There was one actually that Bassi he slid in with a challenge and it clipped him on the arm. There were a couple other close ones. There was that one, I think it got sort of pinged across the box and it hits the Leeds player on the arm and clearly changed the trajectory. It should have easily been called a free kick and wasn't. I can understand why both of them were left alone. And again, at least there was some consistency there. It would have been very annoying if Bassi's had been called.
consistently shit.
Well, it's not shit. It's setting a
But
precedent and saying I'm not giving this handball, and therefore I'm also not giving this handball.
sure,
because
consistent for
because
sure.
there's nothing that maybe could have been done about either of them because the ball does get flogged. The problem is that one, the one for us at least, I felt it was in an attacking position and
Yeah,
it clearly changed, could quite drastically change the direction of the ball. Bassey's, like the commentator said, there's nothing he could have done to get his arm out of the way of that. So I understand why neither of them were given. I thought the ref in general was better than we've seen so far this season from most refs, purely because he just sort of stayed out of the game a bit.
yeah,
He maybe
yeah.
could have given some of those crowding out fouls as fouls, but again, I'm kind of glad that he didn't because if you look at the flip side, he probably could have given a foul against Muniz for that Smith Rowe chance, but he didn't because he just let the game be a little bit more physical than maybe it's been against other sides. There were a number of fouls. I think Fulham. I'll quickly pull up the stats for the game. Fulham, I believe, gave away 20 fouls for the game, and Leeds gave away 15. Look, I thought the ref was fine for the majority of the game, so I don't have too many issues with him.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree with that. I didn't notice him. He didn't bother me. I thought it was interesting that I don't believe he missed those handballs. He clearly decided not to act, which was interesting.
And I think that's fine as well to decide not to act, as long as
Yep.
there's consistency, which there was. So I don't have
Yeah.
any issues with the ref's performance in general. Man of the match, it was given on the Premier League website, which is obviously a general vote, to Joachim Anderson. I think he won it quite comfortably as well. Personally, I don't think he had the best game. I think defensively he was fairly sound. Going forward, I thought he was actually a little poor. It's one of those weird ones where I think a lot of people would have been crying out for Kevin to be given man of the match based on the impact he had, even though he was only on for 20 minutes, I guess, by the time you include injury time. Would you have given Anderson man of the match for this one?
Look, we talked about this a little bit before we came on today. I actually thought I thought he was pretty good. I think Kenny Tete has probably been a bit unlucky not to have copped a mention there because I thought he was very good in moments yesterday. Um, in terms of who provided the best entertainment, even for the 10 minutes that he was on the field, I can see why Kevin people wanted to give it to Kevin because they probably got their money's worth more out of Kevin than anyone else. Um, Look, I I have missed an inform Anderson, and if I think he's been pretty good the first 3 games of the season, and apparently he had a very good international break.
Yeah.
Um, and if that means we're getting the kind of Anderson that we were expecting when we re-signed him, I couldn't be happier because I think he's a really key player. When he's on song, I think Fulham are a real force. So
Mm.
that doesn't answer your question as to whether I think he was deserved man of the match, but I'm pretty keen to see him playing well again. Is what I'm really saying.
Yeah, he picked up 40% of the vote. The next highest was Calvin Bassey on
Interesting.
18%, then Leno on
Oh, I'm not sure.
17%.
I'm not sure I agree with that. I think Calvin Bassey had a far from his best game.
I agree. Leno, I thought, he made a
He
couple of
made a
saves, but
couple of decent saves, but
but
not
to
not
get
like
to be
crazy.
the third highest rated player for man of the match, I thought was Kenny Tete ended up with just 3%, which was the same. Well, the same as Sean Longstaff for Leeds. So, and look, a quick view on the opposition as well. I think Leeds are going to struggle this season if they cannot score goals. I was never overly worried about them going forward. I didn't think they really created too many decent chances. And yeah, I think Leeds might struggle this year based on that because the signing of Calvert-Lewin doesn't look like an inspiring one. Okafor, I thought, struggled. Willie Nonto was quiet as well. Interesting to see how Leeds go this season and be interesting to see how we go when we go up to Ellen Road because I think it might be quite a different looking team or at least starting lineup when we do go up there. A comment here from Black, White and Fred as well, though, around Anderson. He did have the armband yesterday as well. I think that's the first time under Marco. Is this inspiring his improved defensive performances? And
I think there's something in that, and
yeah,
I like
quite
the move.
possibly.
I
And I
really like
think
the move.
we've seen him. He's obviously a previous captain of Fulham, and it's one of those ones where I think Robinson seems to get the armband over him purely for longevity. Because I think he maybe leads by example rather than in terms of actual leadership ability on the field. I think Anderson has that sort of presence about him, and so it might be that we see Anderson carrying the armband a little bit more often as the season goes on, and maybe gets it over Robinson going forward.
Personally, I'd
Yeah,
like
look,
that.
I'm fine with Anderson getting man of the match. I didn't think he was great yesterday, but I will
Are
accept
you
it.
happy? Are you happy with Anderson getting the armband over Robinson?
Oh yeah,
Generally,
100%. I think
I definitely am.
I actually think we've seen a better Anderson so far this season than we did last season, which is good. I think defensively we've looked fairly good this season when you sort of break it down. I think if you look at the results across the season so far, I'm not unhappy with how we've played and how we've defended. So I think there's a lot of positives to take from what was a bit of a dire performance yesterday, in an overall sense of sort of overarching sense of how the season may pan out. There's a lot still to come, and I think what we really just need from here is Marco to be a little brave and maybe not make any tough decisions because I don't think there are any tough decisions, but we clearly have a squad with a bit more depth now than we did before, and I'd like to see Smith Rowe maybe injected in. I think he deserves his chance now. I think Kevin needs to start against Brentford. I can't see any reason why he shouldn't now, based on that little cameo, unless he's unfit, which he doesn't look. Because I think he's already played 6 or 7 games this season for Shakhtar as well, so he's probably fitter than most of our team.
And scored 5.
And then Chukwueze, I think, needs to be sort of rushed into the side as quickly as possible as well. And I think we could be very dangerous against Brentford if we make some of those changes. And I'd like to see that happen. Is it going to happen? Don't think so. Before we finish up, just a quick call out, as always, for our Discord. If you haven't already joined, you definitely should. Great place to talk all things Fulham. We have a thriving community there with a lot of people constantly talking about everything to do with Fulham. On match days, it's great as well. You're able to follow the game very closely live in a way that you can't follow anywhere else on the internet without a subscription. Please do join up. You can find all the links in our bios. It's a great place to talk all things Fulham. And as I said before, we're very fortunate to have great people in there, such as Jack Kelly, Fulham Fan News, Russ from Cottage Talk, Cottage Tactico. It's a great community, and if you haven't already jumped in, please do. And also, we're fortunate to be able to grab a bunch of questions from the Discord as well, which we've answered throughout the pod. So please do jump in and join and get involved with the community there. Dad, look, any final words to sort of close this one out? It was I was going to say it was an exciting game. It wasn't an exciting game, but we walked away with all 3 points. How are you feeling post-game now?
No, I think I didn't. I didn't. I was frustrated during the game, but as soon as the game finished, I felt that there was suddenly a lot to be excited about, and
Mm,
so I'm actually really looking forward to the next few games. I I think people are going to be surprised by Chukwueze. I know Kevin has got the name because he's exciting and he's tricky and he's Brazilian, but I think people are going to be stunned at the sudden elevation of quality that we suddenly have on these two wings. Something a bit different from both of them, but I think if we get them on song, I think it's going to lift everything from ESR, possibly bring Moonies and Raul into many, many, many more goal scoring, genuine quality opportunities, and I think I think it's really, 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 really exciting.
Here's a question for you before we do finish up. Um, do you think these signings of Kevin and Chukwueze have potentially, well, will potentially aid our Carabao Cup campaign? Because now all of a sudden, if those two do get starting spots in the starting 11, and we play a rotated side in the Carabao Cup, you might potentially have, Jimenez, Wilson, and Iwobi starting as your front three against Championship or
Sure.
League One sides going forward.
Well, it's a question of depth, and the answer's got to be a resounding yes. So absolutely, it's just look. I'm going to be grateful for what we've got because it looks really good. Um, I will always be wondering what if, in the case that we actually signed an exciting, an attacking midfielder, but maybe we get our wishes because Marker turns king into that midfielder. Who knows?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, I think we can probably wrap it up there. Dad, thank you for joining tonight. Thank you to everyone who's joined
Yeah,
on the
pleasure.
live. As always, we stream these on YouTube, on X, and on Facebook. So you can always join in and interact with us during these podcasts. We really appreciate anyone who pops in questions, anyone who just pops in general comments as well as we're talking. It's great to have that sort of engagement as we're going. So please do jump in next time you see the live. We often announce them beforehand, but we will be back with After Dark this week. That'll be either the Wednesday or the Thursday, not 100% sure yet. But we'll be seeing the return of the usual squad for After Dark, hopefully. Dad, once again, thank you for joining.
Yeah, pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Um, and it was a light team with just the two of us, but back to the old fireside chats, and well, yeah, I guess we'll just take on the mantle of the best of the international team then.
Absolutely. Someone's got to do it, seeing as everyone else said they're unavailable. Weak.
Yeah.
Look, I think I can close this one out because I never get to do it. So thank you. And as always, you whites.